Welcome to Anecdotes for Success with Matt and Paul. Storytelling is an art form, emphasizing the value and learning that is created through personal experience. Our purpose is to share these stories and experiences with the listener. Everyone has a powerful testimony. Let's use them to level up to our best life with truth, meaning, trade-offs, and perspective.
All right, I almost did it again. We started talking. We were going to have some good convo, and I had to make sure I hit the record button. Gene, Natali, thanks for coming on tonight.
Paul, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity.
Yeah, you briefly met Matt, but we purposely hold Matt back for a little bit now so you guys can get to know each other through the episode. But start off by telling us what you're doing. I already know, so I'm going to let you have free reign for where you want to go, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, excellent. So I will share, if this is a video recording, they see the picture of Roberto Clemente on my right shoulder, which is a giveaway on my location of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I got to show you something. I'm a big Pirate fan.
Well, there's not many. The Pirate fans have been declining over the years, so that's nice to see, Paul.
Absolutely.
Not to interrupt, but my wife and I just bought tickets to the Pirates game on August 2nd, maybe. We're heading out, driving through that way, so we're going to be in Pittsburgh in early August. So speaking of Pittsburgh, I just had to throw it out there.
Great ballpark, Matt. You'll have a blast.
I've been there a few times. I'm a big Steelers fan as well. I'm a Yankees fan, but my wife and I love baseball. And when we travel, we love to hit places, baseball parks in particular. And Pittsburgh is at the top of the list in terms of ballparks, in my humble opinion. So.
Oh, I love here. Well, if we were filming in the morning, the lights in my office, it shines like a spotlight on Clemente. So they're a little bit low as the day goes on, but in the first thing in the morning, it's really kind of fun. It shines perfectly as he celebrates that 3,000th hit.
Which he ended on, unfortunately, as us baseball aficionados would know.
An incredible story of selflessness that he lived.
True. You don't see that as much, or it's not rewarded as much or talked about as much, I guess, today with current ball players.
It's a different. That's why the picture is on my shoulder on the wall here. That's how you celebrate 3,000. You lift your cap and put your foot back on the base.
Yeah.
And that's just in this era would that happen still, or would you have to pause the game? And
well, Gene, let's go to my favorite baseball player of all time, which happens to be Ricky Henderson, who happens to be the antithesis of that celebration where he lifts the base up, I'm sure you know, and says, "I am the greatest of all time."
Different approaches.
Great ball player, but definitely a different approach, and one that I personally, even though he's my all-time favorite player, I prefer Roberto Clemente's reaction and celebration than I do Ricky Henderson's, for whatever that's worth.
Both great ball players, so
no question.
Inspiration can be found in both. I certainly relate to the, tap your foot back on the base and get back to it.
Get back to it. Me too. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but that's good stuff. I love it.
Well, based in Pittsburgh, founded Troutwood. We're a software company building financial planning software. We founded out of Carnegie Mellon University's Swartz Center now 4.5 years ago. I'm an alum of the school, attended Carnegie Mellon for my master's degree in finance. Prior to that, spent 17 years working in institutional investing. What that means is the large state retirement systems, the large teacher retirement systems. And we can certainly bridge to the experiences there that led to Troutwood and the knowledge gained. And then on the personal front, 4 kids, a wife, a chocolate lab. We live just north of Pittsburgh, a very outdoor-oriented family. We spend as much time as we can doing something active and something outside.
That's incredible.
Nice.
I want to focus at first. Well, we could get into a lot. I want to focus at first on Troutwood. How did that come about? And explain a little bit about it to our viewers.
So currently, 1% of Americans have a financial plan, and that number correlates nearly perfectly with the number who have the wealth to work with a financial advisor. Said differently, Paul, 100% of financial advisors have financial plans for 100% of their clients. We wanted to open the door to the 99%. The world that I lived in prior to Troutwood, the state retirement systems, the big teacher retirement systems, are called institutional investors. They manage large pools of money on behalf of large pools of individuals. And 100% of those institutional investors also have a plan. So there's this guiding direction that the world's most sophisticated investors have, and that financial advisors and high net worth individuals have. We thought it would be a very good thing if individuals had access to that, which led to the question, how do you do it? It hasn't been done before, and it's going to be a two-part process. First, helping people understand why they need a financial plan. And there is a stat that's meaningful. 25% of Americans budget. Some media sources grab that 25% and call it a financial plan. A budget is not a financial plan. A budget tells you where you've been. Financial plan tells you where you're going. And step one of our process, we compiled nearly 100 million unique data points to give students the ability to model a financial plan for a career, location, and goal of their choosing. Our app allows for 13.5 million unique career and cost of living combinations. And if a student can't find a plan in that number, they can customize their own. Step two, we have been working with a number of large corporations and financial advisors to fill the current void in society of what happens when a student graduates either high school or college and enters the working world and builds the wealth to work with the finance industry, to work with a financial advisor. And that product is very powerful. We call it our pro product. My hope and dream is twofold. One, that every young person graduates with a financial plan. And then two, 20 years from now, when they choose a financial advisor, the financial advisor simply says, hey, Paul, hey, Matt, can you upload your Troutwood profile? Looking forward to working with you.
So, Gene, why 20 years from college to the time someone would work with a financial advisor directly, if I'm understanding that correctly?
So the number there's a little bit arbitrary, Matt.
Of course.
Historically, folks start saving for retirement in their mid 30s to early 40s. I think we're going to see a tilt in the needle. There's a wave of financial literacy education. Folks like Mike Sheffer, who Paul referenced, are leading that charge. Financial literacy education is here to stay. It's not a finished conversation, but it is a fast-growing, has huge momentum conversation. It's got a very positive impact.
Go ahead.
In my opinion, one of the positive impacts of that is going to be we'll start to see earlier age that savings and investing starts.
Yeah, and I struggle to find a downside for that for anyone in that. What has been you mentioned 99% of people don't have a plan, and what has been the hurdle for that, not only for them but for the people on the other end who look, if I'm a financial advisor, knowing that I've got 99% of the population as a potential customer that's out there that no one's touching, where are the hurdles getting over this? It seems like there'd be so much pressure, if nothing else, from the financial organizations is look at this marketplace, it's wide open. Why are people struggling to get there?
So there were historically barriers in the industry that made it very difficult to manage and in full disclosure, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a CFA charter holder, not a CFP charter holder. So these are just Gene's opinions. But historically, the industry, it wasn't easy if you had a lower net worth than what is called the minimum required assets by financial advisors to get someone to answer the phone. Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab have been hugely disruptive in opening the door to individuals with far less, but they're very painful onboarding processes. I teach University of Pittsburgh a personal finance class. My students study those three companies intimately. They haven't mastered what Robinhood and Acorns have mastered from a user interface, user experience, but they're candidly just great low-cost products. So it's worth kind of suffering through the 15 to 30 minutes. In lieu of that, Matt, though, there's emotions, right? So I'm rounding a little bit here, but roughly half of Americans don't invest.
Yep. Okay.
And my boots on the ground analysis which is just kind of a personal preference versus the heavy data sets. And in over 1,000 unique presentations to student audiences, fear and lack of trust.
Okay.
And the
And
third
that's
most common is lack of knowledge.
ultimately what I was assuming the answer. I didn't know the answer when I asked the question. Um, there's a lot of things I don't know, so you can assume I don't know when I ask a question. Um, that it was fear, and lack of trust makes a tremendous amount of sense as well, because wasn't that long ago that you could have put me right in the category with those same two concerns.
Well, and that's a great point, because so many of these students coming through now, these young adults, we talk a lot about first generation college students. We don't talk much about first generation investors.
Mm.
So they may be coming home and mom or dad will say, well, no, that's no different than gambling.
Yeah, Gene, that's interesting. I had some recent conversation with someone, and we were talking about, well, I got talking about pensions and those types of things, and I was it was interesting to hear that this particular person's goal for their children was for them to go out and get a job that offered them a pension, and in her mind, that was this some sort of level of dream success. And whatever you feel about that, one way or the other, in terms of whether having a pension or not is the dream. I certainly have my opinion, but that's irrelevant. What I was wondering is, or what I was curious about in that conversation is, how realistic is that dream even anymore at this point? So, I mean, I feel like you're talking about first generation investors. So to me, many people are first generation investors out of necessity more than anything else, because those pensions that well before us, I think, sitting here, those have many of them have gone the way of the dodo bird, right? And been gone for a long time. There's not a lot of pensions out there, even the ones that do exist. I'm not sure that would be my goal as a human, but that's everyone's personal opinion. But I don't know how an 18-year-old right now thinks that my financial future is in some pension. Is that am I all wet on that? Is that that I have no data to back that up, by the way, Gene. That is just my opinion.
Matt, it's an excellent perspective. I'll answer twofold. The goal is not a bad objective for the individual whom you referenced. The stats, and these are sourced through the BLS, are currently 13+% of individuals of working Americans have access to a pension fund.
Okay.
And 1.8% of the class of 2023 will have access to a pension fund. So It's not an easy objective.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Holy cow.
Well, and the careers where it remains, K through 12 education, government, post office, federal, state, local, county employees, the trades, although the trades is not everyone anymore. The trades has had a little bit of a narrowing of the pension, but many are still holding on there. And then firefighters, police officers, and our 5 military branches. The two pieces of this equation that are really interesting. So my son's second grade teacher has been there for 40 years. I think a pension's a big reason why. But the companies that surround us in Pittsburgh are struggling with employee turnover.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very strong correlation there. Have a pension, not leaving my job.
Right.
But where is that cracking a little bit? Teachers. Ohio has a great amount of press hour at the moment, had the teacher crisis. They've had teachers leaving and having a hard time filling that void. And when I talk to teachers, either at the just classroom level or at the union level, many new hires don't understand a pension fund. They don't necessarily know what they have. And when you say, well, do you plan to be retired for 30 years? Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. Times your last year's income by 30. That's what you have. And like the conversation completely halts because it's such a big number. It's so hard to comprehend, but we are failing at communicating exactly the benefit. When you go to a younger person, they've never heard the term pension fund. So they're a little bummed out that they won't have income for life when they hear that's what it is. But because they've never heard of it, they move on pretty quickly. The societal challenge and change is they can't move on without taking action.
Well, wouldn't you say that's a great thing, Gene? I mean, I would argue that the be put in a position where you have to take action is going to make you put you in a position to make so many different decisions and put you in such a better spot long term than a position where someone goes, "Don't worry, you're covered."
I agree. Personal finance is bigger than a letter grade, far bigger. So particularly in this kind of conversation, action has to follow. But I don't think it's that easy, Matt. A pension fund, you didn't have the option of opting out. You were in by default of being hired. It was
Right. Yeah.
benefit for everyone.
Yeah.
Now you have to opt in to employee driven or 401k, 457, 430. You have to opt into that. So there's a step that unfortunately many don't take. That whether they are just maybe they're uneducated on it, maybe HR is busy that day when they're onboarding for a multitude of reasons. So I guess I share your opinion on it, but I'm not 100% certain that we're there as a society where yours and my enthusiasm is being replicated by the 18, the 22, and the 25-year-old about the opportunity that they have.
I'm sure you're right about that. I'm looking at it from a macro level. I think, I'm sorry, a micro level. I think maybe you're looking more macro. And I'm not looking at it from anything other than, look, I believe in personal responsibility, and I believe that you get out of life based on the decisions you make, the choices you make. And I started getting into my finances late in life. Maybe statistically, maybe not. Maybe kind of somewhere close to what you were saying. But when I look back in horror to think that if I had some sort of guarantee, where I would be today. I would be on the same path of let's work for 30, 35, 40 years, live a certain standard, do A, B, C, and D. A thing that I just personally it wouldn't work for me as I look today. It would dramatically change my life, and it not just financially, in many ways. And that's where I like to encourage people to take control versus get in a position where you're just promised something in the end. But to your point, Gene, it takes action at that point. It takes doing, and that can be hard for some people. And there's no question about that.
Couple things. As a teacher, right, 26 years in, I think the pension's a huge supplement if you know what you're doing. I started at 25 after a brief career in banking. I went back to teach. So when they told me I got this pension, I'm like, okay, great. What else can I do? Oh, 403B. So since 25, pumping tons of money in there, right? And it's to the point, I'm 51 now. I'd like to retire at 53, but New York State won't let me collect my pension till I'm 55. So of course, luckily I could leave, but I mean, it's a whole nother conversation. I actually like my job and I'll stick around, but I've set myself up with summers off and sports camps and extra money investing that the pension was a huge springboard as a public educator, right? Because we're limited on what we can make. But so many teachers I talk to don't even have anything additionally to the pension. And that becomes crippling. And that becomes why people spend 40 years teaching, right? One other quick point, the first generation investors, Gene, Matt comes into my class a lot as a mentor, and we do so much financial literacy. And you can tell right off the bat the kids who go home and parents aren't on board with it because it's gambling or because they don't know any better. Then I have the students, as soon as they turn 18, are in my classroom after school setting up a brokerage account with Schwab or Fidelity. And they're like, wait a minute, I'm just putting $50 a month in. What if next year I put in 100? And what if I go to community college with all my free credits I've accrued instead of the private school? And all of a sudden, and I go back and show them hypotheticals. All right, say you started in 1999. Look how much you would have lost in 2001, 2008. 2016, last year. And they're like, yeah, but I still made all this. Yeah, exactly. Just keep adding. So all that aside, as exciting as the conferences are, exciting as the movement, I think New York next year is going to make financial literacy mandatory. I think they're one of the next states on board. And there's only like what, 15 or 17 states right now, I think, that require that. It's
Just a
low.
touch over that. I think we're at 20.
But
It's
but
fast and furious right now.
but despite all that, it blows my mind that if you have to be careful how you present it to the kids, and that's why we'll talk more about your app in a minute. I learned 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 15-year-olds, when you start talking about any type of retirement, they just go blank on you. They never see themselves being 40, 50 years old. But when you start talking about setting money aside so you have a choice to change careers in 10 years, or you go back to your 20-year high school reunion and you're actually driving that nice car at that point because you have all these investments or mutual funds or ETFs. Now, or you bartend on the weekends and you save that money and look what you'll have when you're 40. Those are the conversations that free up, along with be careful what college debt you have and what other things you have. But so many teachers that I talk to, if they even do talk about financial literacy, just talk about retirement. And it doesn't even this generation, I don't even think retirement's a thing like we think it or our parents thought it. It with pensions, like they're just going to keep working or switching gears or pivoting or doing whatever they do. And so we try to go about it as freedom. And I think you try to do the same with your app from what I've looked at it.
100%.
Sorry for the rant.
No, you said something really important, Paul, because I've done a lot of trustee and retirement system training as well. The pension fund was never designed to be the sole source of income. It was supplemental. But for many, I'm going to read you live. Vanguard just put these numbers out. The median 401k, 65 and older, $87,000. It's a crisis. It's a crisis that's not getting communicated. And yes, the folks are saying, I'll work until the day I die. That sounds great when you're 25, 35, 45. How's it going to sound when you're 65 and 75? Maybe not as great. So it is, Matt, you said it well, Matt, that we've got to figure out a way to, I say transfer ownership to the individual, but spark that action.
Yeah.
Because if you take time out of the equation, it becomes a nearly unsolvable problem. With time, it's very solvable, not just solvable, but quite exciting. What can happen.
I always tell my students, and I hope this doesn't come out wrong, when you see the person working at the convenience store, the mini mart, the Walmart when they're older, are they working there because they want to, because maybe they like the social interaction, or are they working there because they have to? And unfortunately, I think we know the answer to that question.
I think spot on.
Hey, Gene, you're dealing with this day in and day out. You said the average 401k 65 or older. Is that what was the statistic?
That was the 65 and older number. Yes.
Median
number, Matt. So
median.
That's dead middle.
Dead middle, right. 87,000. What happened? Like real world, what happens with someone in a situation like that? They get their Social Security, right?
They'll get Social Security, and they will work. They'll have to work to supplement that income. Maybe some subset of those do have a pension on the side, although I speculate no, because that would be in the 403B or 457 categories. So I think it's a pretty clean number.
Wow.
Based on the data.
So Gene, how are you and your team and your app? How are you solving this for these people? This situation, which is you use the word crisis, and I don't think that's hyperbole. I think it is a crisis for a large number of people. And I'm very curious. Like, what do you guys do? How does it work? And why are people using it?
Yeah. So I'll give the analogy that I'd given earlier: 13.5 million. Hypothetical plans. What happens when a student graduates? Well, they've got to live in. So we had to build the software to have a working, living, breathing financial plan. And that's what our team has done. That's our bet on the action. So that document, the financial plan concept that financial advisors build for 100% of their customers, that tends to be a written document. And it outlines the client's goals, maybe their risk tolerance, obstructions to the goals, and a range of possible outcomes. We've just created conflict-free software, so we don't have to be a financial advisor. Individuals be able to use our application to manage their financial lives without us needing to manage their money. In my opinion, Matt, I'll share this because any financial advisors listening, we're building to you. We're not competing against you. I am very pro the work that financial advisors do, the banking industry does. There are reasons for some of that regulation, and we don't have to look much farther than FTX and the collapse of crypto to understand why. But we can't continue to let people blindly navigate 10, 20, 30, 40 years of their life as they attempt to build wealth without a guide, without help. In my opinion, to be disrupted, it had to be software, because software to date offers the only scalable solution to reach a large user base.
So I'm 20 years old, 22, whatever, and I use the app and I punch in my income, my age, my, how many children I have or want to have, right? Whether I'm single or married, I'm punching in my plan. My current situation and maybe my plan, and that software will take it along with my goals, right? I want to retire at 68 with, $500,000. And this is going to spit out, in a sense, hey, Matt, here's your plan based on that. This is how much you need to make. This is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, that really does sound awesome. What kind of success are you seeing with people because it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, like, will people do it, right? Will they take action? We can beat them over the head with the reasons for it, but are you finding they're doing it? And if so, why do you think they're doing it?
So we are seeing terrific adoption at the student level. We have, I believe, the best one-time use financial planning app ever built. It's life-changing. I've had teachers call with tears streaming down their faces. They share emotions that they watched in the classroom. Our pro product is live on our Teams phones. Troutwood proper is getting released to the public later in August 2023. We are onboarding our first 3 pro beta customers who will be living, breathing everything we just talked about, Matt. The 2 pieces that I'm most excited about that solve the pain point you allude to is one, a tool called FinPulse, and that measures an individual's contribution streak to a long-term saving investing goal. It's a bet we are making to help a young person get started and consider the success the Snapchat streak has had, but tie that into, hey, I'm 127 months in, I'm not going to stop now. Or how exciting it would even be to see go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 months and form that good habit.
Yeah.
That interest is something you can earn, not just pay. The second, we've created an investor center that's called the Troutwood Map. It's live on our website, and we have a very powerful update coming early this fall that, in my opinion, will help with the fear piece and the trust piece. So much of let's just say all of history, outside of a few folks like Warren Buffett who have been espousing index funds, Jack Bogles, but most of the marketing we get is to buy individual stocks. When you see a news feed, it's not buy the S&P 500 and ignore for the next 40 years. It's 3 stocks that will double, or the hottest stock from our team of professional experts they're willing to give you. That has to change. That has to get wiped out of the system. Someone who owns the S&P 500, let's say a student of Paul's, let's say a senior opens a Roth IRA because of Paul's great work, they can go to the lunchroom and say, I've got 21 million people working for me.
Right.
The fact. That's how I think of investing. That's especially at this stage. I'm not anti a student buying a couple shares of Tesla alongside that Roth IRA and broad S&P type approach. But it's pretty cool that an 18-year-old can have 21 million people working for he or she for a secure financial future.
Just real quick before you go on, that's the hard part. When we do simulations in school, the kids love the idea of buying individual companies, and they all it must be a human mind thing. They all think they're going to make money buying and selling and timing it. And I just let it go for 6 weeks, and almost everybody's under in like 6 weeks because they panic. But if you buy the S&P 500 and just sit on it for it blows my mind. So you have to let them do that though with fake money.
We all had to learn too, right? You learn through mistakes. Never waste a good mistake to build a better future. We built a game called Buy, Sell, Hold. I use it to take attendance at the University of Pittsburgh. It's a fast, furious 42 turns, which equates to 42 years, the average career length in America. And it's the S&P 500 over the last 100 years. But you don't know what time period, and it's in chronological order. So we didn't code curveballs. You play, 1950 to 1992. But because it's real, students believe it. So our data shows that only about 2% of people beat the market playing the
Wow.
game. Right.
Wow.
It's very difficult to beat the S&P, even blindly without the media. With the media and a Twitter feed, that number would be even smaller because people would just click hold, and forget it. But it is confidence inspiring. The average score, what we did was the game, I'll give away some of the trade secrets. We took a $50,000 average salary, average company match, and then do $5 a day from the individual, $5 a day from the employer. So $10 a day for the whole 42 years. Based on that $50,000 salary, and the average score is 3.1 million.
Wow.
I share that because that's what students say, Matt, by about week 5 or 6. Week 1, they're like, what am I doing? Week 2, they're like, why am I doing this again? I don't know what I'm doing. Week 3, a couple start to figure it out, and that causes frustration for those that haven't figured it out. By the halfway point, they're kind of like, gosh, he's doing it again. We already all know how to do it now. By like week 7, 8, 9, they're saying, how do I open a Roth IRA? Because they're seeing 3 million so often and they're seeing it across different time periods. That's what's one of my favorite metrics of my teaching at Pitt. About half of my students open Roth IRAs every semester. And I think that's far more meaningful than the letter grade.
Oh, it's
Absolutely.
amazing. That really is something. Wow. Talk about an impact.
I want to jump back for a minute. You were talking about how when you see advertisements, it's usually just for individual companies. This year during March Madness basketball, I was picking up Invesco QQQ had some advertisements, and I stopped it and showed my students, and they're like, I don't know what that is. But here you have, it's almost like I don't know what they must have somehow thought this is the type of people we want. Like we wanted to tap into this market. Like I don't have any idea of the scheme behind it, but most of the kids didn't know what it was. I guarantee you 90% of the people watching didn't know what the advertisement was about.
So the company that runs QQQ is called Invesco. They formed a partnership with the NCAA. So their flagship offering is QQQ, which is an index fund of the 100 largest technology companies. I think they paid a lot of money for that partnership, but they got in front of an audience that they thought was important. It's interesting if you think about that example you shared, Paul, because the S&P 500 is the much broadly talked about. And Warren Buffett every year, buy it, tune out the noise, ignore the down years, and just stick with it. QQQ is trying to position itself in that same way, and they're spending some dollars marketing it.
We looked it up, and the kids were like, well, what if I just put $50 a month in there starting out, $100 a month? I said, good. I mean,
100%.
You get online and people want to nitpick which fund you should get, or I don't care if you go through some sort of finance person where you're paying fees for a mutual fund, or if you're doing it yourself. But the most important thing is to start doing it, right? And then you can figure it out along the way.
If they took your advice, Paul, QQQ is up meaningful year to date, giant in there. It's kind of a historic rebalance that's taking place. I believe it's later this month, where the 7 largest companies in QQQ, and you could source these, made up over 50% of that index. So they had to rebalance them down. They'd grown to be such, and those are the big ones: the Apples, Teslas, Google, etc.
Hey, Gene. Let me ask you this question. So, we're talking about younger kids, students, and that kind of thing, and how advantageous it is for them to get in early and do exactly what you guys are recommending here, which I don't disagree with at all. What do you say to the person who's 45, 50 years old who hasn't done it? And now they've lost out on the most important aspect of this, right? Which is time. And this person wakes up one day and goes, I wanted to retire at X year. I haven't been saving. I don't have a pension. I haven't been doing anything except spending my money on remodeling my kitchen and going to Disney World and upgrading my car every time I get a chance because I can afford it. Here I am now. Number one, do you work with people like this, or does your app help people like this? And, what do you say to those people? How do you help people like that?
Yeah, you have to be honest, right? That's part one. And the margin for mistake is certainly smaller the older that you are. The upside is, in most cases, a little smaller as well. With Paul's class of students, you can legitimately say there is really no ceiling on what you can do if you start now, and how you grow that investment amount. 45, particularly if you add in some life complications of maybe added expenses, right? Which are higher than a 17 or 18-year-olds and more of. So you have to understand the money you have. You have to understand where the money is going. And here's a foe that we are all up against, Matt, that we have to be very cognizant of. The companies competing for our paycheck are smarter than we are. And if hypothetically you've been losing that battle for 20 years, you've got to really understand why. You gave the example of a truck. I'm a Ford truck guy. I get it. I like Toyotas a lot and hope to have a Tacoma one day. But you have got to be, I think there's a cognizance that we live in a very consumer-driven society right now. I see the engineers, Carnegie Mellon's software programmers ranked #1 in the world again. We bring in the world's best computer engineers here into Pittsburgh. Then they go work for these companies where their job is writing code in most cases to help these companies better get our paycheck. I'm generalizing, of course,
Right,
but that's the world we live. So I think you have to understand that it is a consumer-driven society. I'm not going to take a stance on whether that's good or bad. I will say that to navigate that society, that arena, you have to save and invest the first dollar from your paycheck, not whatever's left over. So you have to completely reshift your focus if you've gotten to that age without savings, and make savings and investing your #1 top priority. There's some catch-up provisions that certainly kick in as you age. I view them as small versus the concept of time. So don't wait another day either.
Yeah, so ultimately you've got two choices, right? You can increase your revenue or lower your expenses for most people, and then take whatever that difference is and invest it, correct? And
Correct.
For most people, the best way, the easiest way, in the immediate way, is to reduce their expenses, because they're not going to double their income overnight. They're not, their chances are. So if you find yourself in that situation, probably the best advice is cut back on your consumption where you can, and I always say this, and be savage about it, like be all about it, be like, I am doing this. And I mean, you'll be amazed. You don't need that $7 coffee every day, right? At Starbucks or whatever. There's a lot you can generally find. You have to be highly motivated in many cases to do that, but I think at that point some people are. But I was just curious what your advice to those people are, because I know I talk to them and they look at you like, where's the magic formula here? Just, I don't want to change my life. I don't want to do anything differently, but I want to reach this goal. And that's just not realistic in most cases.
If you want something, you have to work for it. And the best day to plant a tree was yesterday. If you missed yesterday, let's get working today. The nice thing with the example you gave, Matt, there's still enough time in that equation. You'd said kind of mid-40s. That gives you 20 years.
Yeah.
Stock market is up 100% of every 20-year period in history. If you would have said 65, I think we have to, phone a friend, because that becomes, if you arrive at 65 with no savings, it's a hard equation. And there are folks who are working in that arena. That's not an arena. I'm focused very, very much on the younger folks, and then empowering individuals with tools they don't have. We've had a fair number of 50 plus beta testers come in and use our app. And primarily they reach out because they feel ignored by the finance industry. Their whole life, they've not been able to get access or help from folks who they view as professionals. So they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and that will have to get kind of pushed through the system too.
Interesting.
So, Gene, if you can get a student to buy into your software, they're 18 years old. I don't know if you want to do this, but what's the probability that once they get hooked on your software, do you think when they're 45, 50 years old, they could have $1 million invested?
Oh, absolutely. Warren Buffett started at 11 with 111 bucks from his newspaper route, I believe it was, and became a millionaire at 30 for the first time. Using the numbers we were talking about earlier in this episode, Paul, if the average American started at 35, retired at 65, a 15-year-old starts with the added benefit of being a Roth IRA and the tax advantages that come from that. Absolutely. You can almost change the way you think to a 15-year-old circling 45 in the calendar and say, at this point, I'm going to start massively bringing in passive income for my investments, where they put like a 3 or 5% spending policy on there at that point. If they're interested, if they love their career, just keep feeding it and let it grow bigger.
See, so thank you. I mean, that was a bit of a softball, obviously, that I threw at you. But that's how I try to go about it with students now that they're sick of school in 12th grade. I go, now fast forward 12 more years in your career or job. You might be sick of it then. And if you're not investing and you have all these expenses, whatever your lifestyle is going to be, you're stuck. Whether the teacher's stuck at 25 years or the doctor or the engineer is stuck because of their lifestyle. But if you're investing at 18, I mean, a Roth, there'd be implications if you took it out early, but get a Roth and then maybe even just put money in a mutual fund or a ETF or something. You
just have to do it, Paul. And there's ways to do it. Paul, I've been in some of the poorest zip codes in America, and those students fist bump and say, Gene, I'll save $1 a day. If you promise me it works this way, I'll save $1 a day.
So it's just getting them once they buy in. It to me, it's about, I mean, wealthy, rich. We could have 5 episodes on what that means, but to me, it's choice and lifestyle and freedom. And if they start when they're younger, they're going to have the freedom, So what you're doing is awesome. I mean, we when Mike came into class this year, we opened up, the kids got into Troutwood. It was later in the year, so we're going 800 different directions. We're going to start it right in September this year. So it's good stuff. I mean, what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, I see you in Arizona this year.
Yes, sir. This is actually saying, Paul, with your passion, I'll throw this suggestion idea out of you. We did a teacher training in my home district here. 250 signed up, but they only had seats for 30. Instead of moving to the auditorium, they told 220 they couldn't attend. And these teachers were asking the same kind of questions that your students ask you. So big learning. So big shout out to Jumpstart November. We're doing a financial planning for teachers session where it's going to be taking those kind of questions, like let's help you navigate what you have. And it's going to be one for first-time attendees and then one for reoccurring attendees. Because Paul, they were asking me questions about annuities and mutual fund A versus mutual fund B. No one was asking like how to calculate their pay. Like it was completely sales oriented questions, which surprised me.
And it's frustrating. We have these places called Burn Dairies and Dandy Mini Marts. Everybody's got their convenience store chain. I walk in, it says hiring 401k plans available. And I try to tell the students, you could work, don't you laugh, but that person working full time at that convenience store, if they had a financial mindset, could literally be sitting on more money than you could ever imagine. The trick is, I don't think they always think that way. They're probably not utilizing it. Like I forget 20 or what percent of people don't even utilize 401ks. Or maybe I just thought of that now. You didn't give us that stat.
No, it's a fairly large percentage. Yeah.
So the job doesn't matter. Like teaching, I get a pension, but you have to do other things, right? You don't go take a baseball lesson once a week and think you're going to be, Ted Williams someday. You have to still do stuff on your own. But investing is actually more guaranteed than trying to be another Ted Williams, if you think about it. And so it blows
I'd be so aggressive as to say it's riskier not to invest than it is to invest with the changes that have occurred in the retirement landscape.
Yeah, I like that.
Gene, why do you think so many people view it as risky? What is that?
I think it's the historical nature of how the conversation has been framed. Paul referenced the Dairy Mart. We have a camp north of Pittsburgh, and one of our neighbors, a farmer, came over on our driveway and was talking about his son. He said, Gene, I've got a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, my son is paying a ton of taxes. We don't know what to do about it. I said, well, pay them. He goes, no, Gene, a lot of taxes. And he walked me through the numbers. And I said, well, is your son's salary this? He said, yeah. How'd you know that? So well, that's the tax rate. He goes, Gene, like, well, how does he not pay this? So well, no, he has to pay. He goes, Gene, we don't make money like this. Like, how do I even know? How do you know this? And how should I know this? It was even the concept of making enough money to hit a tax was so foreign. And when I showed him what the doors or the conference to kind of like the points here in investing, I showed what would happen if his son did a 401k enrollment. A very strong farmer started crying on my driveway. He said, Gene, futures like this weren't possible for folks like us.
Mm.
Like that. So there is so much that has to happen, Matt, that I like that analogy. We started like that first generation investors. It's almost like Paul's students have to push upstream and teach their families, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the historical being a breadwinner for your family. Maybe now you've got to really share this knowledge.
Yeah, good point.
I'm so passionate about it, Gene. I mean, I get to select my kids from 8 different school districts. They're honors kids, but they almost are going to end up poorer than some kids in the trades because they're smart. They get taught to go to the private school, and that's great. You take out a lot of money if you have to, and you have a great job, but now their expenses are here, they're making here, and everybody thinks they have such a great life. They'd almost be better going to community college. I'm trying to challenge a kid to not go to college until they can bank 10,000, invest it, and forget about it. Now go to college. And I get the biggest kickback from the parents. They'll think I'm crazy, but they'd be 1 or 2 years behind everybody else. What would hurt?
Yeah.
But it's not the narrative society really teaches, do we? Go to school, get this. And I'm not anti-college at all. I just think it doesn't have to be right after high school necessarily, or it doesn't have to be said school, for prestige. Of course, I'd love to go to Carnegie Mellon. Don't get me wrong.
But your point is fair. My kids can take free coding classes from Carnegie Mellon that are public on their website. Like, education is being transformed in front of our eyes. I think you're nudging an interesting direction there, Paul.
Well, we're trying, but hey, this was great. We kept you a little longer than we told you we would, but I don't think you minded too much, maybe. So
not at all. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited. You and Matt need to talk more sometime. Yeah, you guys are both super good people in my book. I don't know who reads my book, but you're both super good people in my book. And but hopefully we'll have you on again, and we can talk more about the app, and even I'll have more data on what I plan to use it much more in school this year as well. It was relatively new when I caught on to it last November and then last March. And it's hard if you implement something halfway through a school year. It's just the way it goes. So
absolutely.
We're going to do it from square one. Gene, thanks so much.
Yeah. Paul, thank you, Matt. I look forward to that follow-up conversation.
Likewise, Gene. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.